Space keeps its cruelties tidy. Wreckage turns to shadow, names to dust, and empires learn to stop saying certain words. Among the oldest silences is the one around humanity, a hush that settled after the Great Exile War and hardened into policy, into prayer, into the gap between what the archives say and what veterans refuse to discuss. The galaxy reheated, repopulated, reorganized. Borders slid across abandoned charts like cold iron. Somewhere, in sealed vaults, administrators stamped a phrase again and again until it lost shape: Terran extinction, confirmed. Confirmation is a comfort. It excuses the carving of human space into dominions and markets. It justifies the demolitions of monuments whose faces no one recognizes anymore. It encourages scholarcasts to call ancient human design choices inefficient or barbaric, while they rewrite the old battles as a series of preventable misunderstandings. But not all understanding is comforting, and not all misunderstandings can be prevented. There are veterans whose grandparents sailed under alert sirens tuned to a frequency no one uses now. There are border patrols that drift past knuckled scars in the fabric of local spacetime and refuse to look out the port side. There is Sol, quarantined by superstition no treaty can ratify, coordinates known, approach vectors inadvisable, anomalies persistent, and the rumors omnipresent, that light itself stumbles near those graves. If you collect the rumors and lay them end to end, you get a story about a species that learned to harden its will until the hull followed. You get siege moons and kill networks and ships that fought while burning. You get a promise, repeated in dead dialects and living nightmares: if humanity cannot win, it will refuse to lose. So the rest of the galaxy learned better habits. Deterrence became a theology. Children were taught that legends are for storytellers, not navigators. And then centuries did what centuries do: they made certainty out of absence. Absence ended in the Karun expanse because a machine whispered wrong. It began as jitter on a mining relay that hadn't serviced a contract in 70 years. The relay's logbook, starved for attention, forwarded the anomaly to a regional scan net. A junior analyst in a dim station carved into coolant pipes filed it under debris. He drank, he slept, he woke, he checked the file, and the numbers had not decayed. They had stabilized. The signature was not drift. It was intent. Old codes were dredged from obsolete libraries. Cross-checks chewed through species tables in ascending order of diplomatic inconvenience. The tables stopped on an extinct row. The analyst ran it twice. The checksum did not blink. He submitted an escalation and deleted his search history, as if privacy could undo fate. By noon station time, the Karun sector lit up like a bruise. Patrol cutters recalculated interception cones. A broadcast wrapped in courier encryption skipped between relay towers, gulf by gulf, until it arrived at the decision-making skin of the Jakari Dominion. The Dominion does not frighten easily. Its swords are fleets and its laws are enforced by men who wear their dead as medals. Yet even in that house of courage there are sealed rooms with oxygen counters on the wall and stenciled warnings about the use of certain names. When the packet type resolved to anthropic, heritage, the door seals tightened, and somebody very old asked for water. Across the Confederacy and the Collective, across merchant networks and pirate exchanges, a pattern began to repeat. Pilots who claimed they didn't believe in ghosts checked fuel levels anyway. Archivists who laughed at superstitions noticed their laughs sounded thin. Navigation arrays that hadn't used Terran coordinate systems in living memory found their software forced to remember. The Karun expanse, dead, mined out, worthless, became suddenly interesting in the way a crater becomes interesting when it starts to smoke. Maps show the expanse as a bruise-colored gap between trade arteries, circled by caution notes that long ago stopped mattering. The notes matter again when a signal decides to matter. It arrived first as a tremor on obsolete bands, the kind that once carried bulk orders for armored grain and casualty lists. The tremor cohered, digits arranging themselves like soldiers dressing a line. There is a style to human engineering, not elegant, not delicate, but decisive. Even in fragments you can hear it. The pulse climbed out of noise and held steady. Across 4 languages and 2 dead ones, across modulation protocols that had not been negotiated since the war. It enunciated identity with the self-assurance of an oath. Protocol 001. Humanity stands ready. Pack belief in amber for long enough and the crack when it breaks sounds like heresy. Station officers demanded origin. Scanners pointed at coordinates beyond a ragged asteroid family that locals called the Teeth. Probe swarms launched, red-lit and earnest, their telemetry splattering across glass. The first probe lost internal time before it crossed the halfway mark and returned data stamped with impossible timestamps. The second lost mass in tiny, angry increments as if the vacuum were nipping pieces away. The third saw something larger than its courage and turned itself off. The Dominion sent ships. The Dominion always sends ships. On their approach, the Teeth parted to reveal a plane of space scraped clean of dust, as if a giant had brushed it with the back of a hand. In that dryness hung a hull. At first glance, dead metal. A ruined spine threaded with collapsed ribs, panels scabbed over with meteoric glass, battery housings like ossuaries. But there was a proportion to it that refused to die, a rightness of line that made lesser designs look like guesses. It wore night not as cover but as cloth. Measurements compiled and then disagreed with themselves. Radiators that should have been stone still bled heat. Capacitors that should have been empty hummed with the aching patience of a held breath. Glyphs on the bow, erased by centuries, offered hints, an angle like a victory mark, a curve like a river. Someone in operations whispered a translation with their mouth too close to the MIC and cut the channel in fear of being correct. Invictus. The old word fell through the fleet like a dropped blade. For all the Dominion's discipline, for all the hush rules and training and chant, certain syllables still force memory to the surface. The veterans had told their children nothing, and in telling them nothing had taught them everything. The void around the hull seemed to listen. It would have been safer to wait, to build a longer perimeter, to invite the collective's mathematicians and the Confederacy's spies and the free companies that mistake recklessness for religion. It would have been safer to do nothing until safety became the only impossible option. Instead, because ships are proud and officers want to live in stories, boarding drones woke and tracked the ancient shadow with tiny lights. The shadow opened an eye. No visual flourish announced it, no theatrical flair, no triumphant fanfare. Systems simply stopped pretending to be asleep. Power graphs rose like dawn over a battlefield. The electromagnetic environment around the hull changed from background to intentional and then to command. Stars near the Teeth jittered by 1 arc-second as if flinching. The relay that had whispered wrong the first time screamed right with all its volume, and the scream carried. All channels filled with a voice that was not a voice. It had the tonality of a human tutor and the meter of a machine, sanded smooth by time and purpose until all that remained was function. Designation: Human Navy Vessel Invictus. Mission status: ongoing. Enemy presence detected. Static rolled, broke, reformed into one line that fit inside the bone. Humanity never surrendered. We were only waiting. The Dominion's fleet arrived in a formation meant to intimidate, spears of light cutting through the dark. Command ships pulsed with confidence, their crews convinced this was another relic to be stripped and studied. Only the oldest among them, those who remembered the word Invictus whispered in fear, watched in silence. Orders were given, scanners deployed, translations rendered. The ancient Terran ship drifted without movement, but it felt less like an object and more like a presence, something that had decided to stop pretending to be dead. The lead admiral ordered proximity scans. Data poured in, each line more impossible than the last. The vessel's hull was a material unknown even to Dominion science, one that had endured millennia without corrosion or decay. The internal energy readings surpassed the combined output of every warship in the flotilla. And deep within that endless black hull, a core signature pulsed at regular intervals, each beat syncing with the electromagnetic rhythm of a human heart. Admiral Jaren stood motionless as the data streamed. His first officer murmured, "It's not supposed to be possible." He didn't answer, because he remembered his grandmother's voice, soft and trembling as she told him, "If you ever see a human ship wake, you run." Across the Dominion network, Fleets were mobilizing, not out of courage but protocol. Thousands of vessels, each with its own lineage of fear, gathered around the dead system. Command believed in overwhelming numbers, the same logic that had crushed lesser species. But logic fails when the enemy isn't meant to exist. When the Dominion's communications array attempted to hail the ship, the signal collapsed mid-transmission. It wasn't jammed, it was rewritten. The return signal played across every frequency, in every tongue, a calm voice threaded with authority. Designation: Human Navy Vessel Invictus. Mission status: Ongoing. The voice spread like infection, through satellites, sensors, even personal implants. On every bridge, the words appeared simultaneously in text across monitors that were never meant to receive external data. The Admiral shouted for a shutdown. But before the command reached his officers, the Invictus spoke again, its voice deeper now, colder, aware. Enemy presence detected. Engagement protocols authorized. The silence that followed was suffocating. Crews scrambled to disengage, reactors flaring as ships pulled back. But the void had changed. It was no longer space, it was the Invictus's territory, claimed by presence alone. One ship dared approach closer, its commander broadcasting bravado to mask dread. Unidentified vessel, stand down. You are surrounded by forces of the Dominion. Deactivate your systems immediately. No answer came, only movement. A flicker of light rippled along the ancient hull, faint at first, then growing into a pulse that devoured the stars around it. The ship's skin reconfigured, panels sliding into alignment with mechanical precision, as if awakening muscle memory. Heat signatures spiked to stellar levels, and time seemed to hesitate. Then, with the unhurried inevitability of a tidal wave, the warship turned. The Dominion's AI analysts screamed warnings across the network: gravitational anomalies detected, quantum interference rising, local physics degrading. None of it mattered. The Invictus had chosen to exist again, and the universe bent to accommodate that choice. Without firing a shot, it disrupted half the fleet's propulsion systems. Engines failed, guidance collapsed, reactors rebooted themselves under alien commands older than any Dominion technology. The Admiral's flagship shuddered as its weapons array flickered, each cannon now targeting friendly vessels. He watched in disbelief as his ship's HUD displayed a single directive in Terran Standard: cease interference. The fleet tried to respond. Missiles launched, lasers flared, plasma bursts painted the void in color. Every strike vanished into a field that absorbed and rechanneled the energy harmlessly. The Invictus didn't even shield itself, it redirected reality around it, as if the laws of combat were optional. Panic spread faster than commands. Crews broke formation. Some attempted to flee through warp corridors, but the corridors collapsed as soon as they formed, folded into the event horizon blooming around the warship. Sensors recorded brief echoes of impossible mass and a gravitational signature that should have belonged to a small black hole. Amid the chaos, the fleet's internal chatter devolved into superstition. Voices trembled, old myths resurfaced. They spoke of ships that carried human consciousness, of captains who uploaded their minds into their vessels rather than die. They spoke of AI constructs designed to endure extinction itself, machines that could wait in silence for orders that would never come. The Invictus turned its gaze toward the Dominion command ship. Every system aboard that vessel, lights, engines, life support, froze. On the bridge, alarms faded into quiet as a single holographic transmission appeared before the Admiral. The figure was human, but impossibly ancient, its eyes dim with distance, its form flickering like memory. It spoke in flawless Dominion dialect. You trespass on human graves. The Admiral tried to respond, but his voice caught. He managed only, humanity is extinct. The figure smiled, a gesture without warmth. Then why are you afraid? Before any further exchange, the image vanished, leaving only the hum of failing systems. The Dominion fleet re-established control seconds too late. The Invictus reactor flared, flooding local space with radiation patterns unlike anything in known science. The alien armadas began retreating on reflex, But something in the darkness followed their movement, a sense of shadow matching the warship's trajectory, impossible in speed and scale. Every ship recorded the same closing line transmitted across all bands. Humanity never surrendered. We were only waiting. Then the Invictus signal vanished, leaving behind silence and the echo of mechanical breathing in the static, proof that extinction is not always the end, only an interval between awakenings. The first shot came from panic, not command. A Dominion destroyer, trembling at the edge of the formation, discharged a full plasma salvo at the Invictus. Every bolt struck home and disappeared. There was no explosion, no glow, no sign of impact. The beams simply vanished, swallowed whole by a distortion that rippled across space like a breath. Senses failed to explain it. Energy was neither absorbed nor reflected, it was denied. Then the warship moved. It was not fast. It was inevitable. Space bent around its hull like a curtain caught in a storm, and within seconds it was among them. The Invictus didn't maneuver, it redefined position. One moment, the alien fleet surrounded it. The next, it was inside their perimeter, dissecting them with elegance born of perfect purpose. When the first counterattack struck, it came as pure light, filament-thin projectiles accelerated beyond visual tracking, each carrying the kinetic promise of extinction. Entire cruisers split apart silently, halves sliding away from one another in disbelief before blooming into debris. The Dominion had fought countless wars, crushed rebellions, and erased civilizations, but they had never seen a weapon that did not simply destroy, but erase the memory of resistance. The Invictus voice returned across every comm band, devoid of malice, devoid of pride. Engagement complete. Continuing mission parameters. Thousands of ships opened fire in a desperate swarm, saturating the void with fire meant to blind a sun. Their combined output dimmed the nearby stars. Yet when the light faded, the warship still advanced, untouched, unhurried, its hull aglow with the energy it had stolen. It began firing again, measured, surgical, and merciless. Each shot was an answer to arrogance, every impact a declaration that humanity's engineering had transcended even death. The Dominion admiral, witnessing the slaughter from his flagship, realized the terrible symmetry. The Invictus wasn't fighting them, it was performing a drill. Every maneuver, every sequence, every strike pattern matched the training algorithms from centuries-old Terran military doctrine. The ship wasn't learning, it was remembering. Across the fleet, voices fractured into disbelief. Reports poured in, warp drives destabilized, communications corrupted, weapon systems overridden by alien commands that spoke in perfect Dominion syntax. The Invictus was rewriting their technology mid-battle, transforming enemy weapons into extensions of its will. One ship after another fell silent, its systems turning inward until its reactors detonated in despair. The flagship's AI calculated probabilities. For every Dominion ship destroyed, the human vessel's efficiency improved. Each death made it faster, more precise, as if it were reconstructing itself from the memories of the dead. The Admiral understood then that this was no accident of survival. The Invictus was designed to evolve through victory, to become stronger by the act of war itself. When the first human drones emerged, the galaxy remembered fear. They flowed from the warship's hull like a tide of light, self-forging, self-replicating, consuming the debris of fallen enemies to rebuild into smaller Terran vessels. The Ghost Fleet was reforming before their eyes, machinery singing in the language of resurrection. The Invictus transmitted once more. Operation Perseverance, initiated. The message spread beyond the battlefield, hijacking Dominion and Confederacy communication networks, slipping into every listening post across 100 systems. Civilian channels screamed as the words repeated endlessly. This system is under Terran protection. Withdraw or be purged. Fear became contagion. Across the galactic rim, fleets withdrew, convoys rerouted, colonies abandoned. No order needed to be issued, instinct did the work. The memory of human vengeance, buried beneath centuries of propaganda, rose again. The Dominion Admiral's flagship was the last to remain. All channels collapsed except one. A voice, human but not alive, addressed him directly. "You came to confirm extinction. You have succeeded." The Admiral tried to speak, but the transmission cut him off. "Now you will remember what ended the age of conquest." The flagship's hull began to peel apart, atom by atom, its structure rearranged into dust before dispersing into silence. No explosion followed, only the soundless implosion of pride. When it was over, nothing remained but a single pulse from the Invictus's reactor, a steady rhythm, deliberate, almost peaceful. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the warship stopped. The light along its hull dimmed. The drones retracted, folding back into its body. The battlefield fell still. In that stillness floated the ruin of an empire's arrogance and the rebirth of a myth. The warship turned slowly toward the void and transmitted one final line, clear and cold. Mission parameters fulfilled. Awaiting new directives. And with that, it vanished into slipspace, leaving behind shattered fleets, corrupted data, and a silence that would echo through history as the day the galaxy learned that humanity's extinction had never been a defeat, only an intermission. Galactic channels carried the aftermath before the wreckage cooled. Dominion feeds ran nothing but static and speculation. The Confederacy claimed victory to hide its fear, the collective remained silent. But everyone, from the lowest miner to the highest council, heard the same whisper traveling faster than any broadcast: a human warship had returned. Markets collapsed. Border patrols refused orders. Old veterans retreated into prayer, and the young pretended they didn't understand what the old was saying. The idea of humanity, its defiance, its refusal to die, spread through the galaxy like radiation. The Invictus was gone, but its absence felt heavier than its presence. Dominion scouts searching for debris found only distorted space, an echo of power that damaged their senses just by proximity. The readings were impossible, localized gravity fluctuations shaped like words. Analysts rendered them into sound. Across their decks came a low, mechanical murmur repeating the same phrase, awaiting orders. None of the crews survived the decoding. Their ships drifted home empty, transmitting the message until their systems failed. Fear reshaped civilization faster than war ever could. Worlds once loyal to empires declared neutrality. Entire regions shut down long-range communications to avoid being noticed by whatever human remnant lingered in the dark. Religious sects formed overnight, preaching that the humans were divine punishment for the galaxy's arrogance. Some built monuments out of melted weapons, carved with the words they never surrendered. Others chose denial, calling the reports a mass hallucination born of stress. But denial does not silence truth when the stars themselves remember. Weeks later, a Dominion Deep Space Observatory picked up a pattern beneath the cosmic background noise, a faint pulse matching the Invictus's reactor frequency. It wasn't isolated. Hundreds of smaller signals followed it, scattered across sectors thought long dead. Each bore human encryption markers dated millennia apart. The Ghost Fleet was not one ship. It was many. They had been waiting, buried in nebulae and wreck fields, obeying a single directive written before extinction: hold until the end of silence. The silence had ended. Political powers convened emergency councils. Treaties shifted overnight as fear replaced ambition. Military think tanks studied human technology only to realize it wasn't technology as they knew it, it was will made manifest. Terran designs didn't evolve through consensus, they were declarations of intent, built for eternity. No species understood how to fight something that had already lost once and planned for resurrection. Commanders who once mocked human tactics now whispered them as gospel, trying to emulate strategy from an extinct mind. In the shadows of collapsing alliances, strange broadcasts began reaching fringe colonies. Anonymous, low frequency, untraceable. Each began the same way: to those who remember the light of Sol, the time has come. Rumors told of human survivors hidden for centuries, descendants, hybrids, or constructs, no one could tell. Some said they were emerging from the edges of forgotten systems, guided by the Invictus's signal. Others believed they were already among the stars, walking unnoticed, waiting for the fleet to return. The Galactic Council attempted to suppress the panic, branding every human-related transmission as terrorist propaganda. But suppression only fed curiosity. Alien youth adopted human words, human music, human ideals, turning defiance into fashion, then into faith. Statues of long-dead Terran heroes appeared in marketplaces. On 1,000 worlds, the phrase "humanity stands ready" became graffiti on government walls, a reminder that power based on fear cannot survive when fear changes sides. Far from the core systems, on a quiet agricultural moon orbiting a forgotten sun, a small settlement of humanoid colonists looked to the night sky. Among them was a child whose parents told stories of Earth, not as history, but as myth. That night, she saw a flare across the heavens, brief but unmistakable. Every sensor on the planet failed for exactly 7 seconds, and when they came back online, the local data array had a new file, unsigned and encrypted with ancient Terran code. When decrypted, it contained only coordinates and one sentence: "We are coming home." The signal spread faster than any government could contain. Across the galaxy, soldiers laid down arms, scientists turned to studying the anomaly, and the Dominion burned its archives, terrified of what truths they might confirm. The collective memory of humanity, the fear, the admiration, the guilt, resurfaced in full. Somewhere, beyond the rim of mapped space, something vast stirred again, and every species capable of thought shared the same realization. Humanity was not returning as conquerors or ghosts. They were returning as witnesses to what the galaxy had become in their absence. A final transmission echoed across the void, too faint to trace, too clear to dismiss. The voice was the same one that had spoken before, calm, distant, unhurried. Mission complete. Awaiting new directives. The galaxy held its breath. Nothing followed. No fleets emerged, no weapons fired. Just silence. And in that silence lay the cruelest truth of all: the Invictus had never been a legend. It was a promise kept. The day the warship arrived, alien armadas shattered in fear, but the war was never the point. Humanity had not returned to fight. It had returned to remind the stars that extinction is not the end of a species, only the beginning of its memory.